Imagine a world where sleep, that universal reset button, suddenly vanished, not just for a night or a week, but forever. What would happen to humanity? How would our bodies, our minds, our very societies unravel without the unconscious embrace of slumber? In 1998, a groundbreaking scientific paper wasn't just speculating. It presented a chilling hypothetical scenario, a thought experiment so profound, it made even the most stoic researchers question the very fabric of our existence. This wasn't some B-grade horror movie premise. It was a terrifying glimpse into a future that, by all accounts, might be far closer than we dare to admit. What if the mechanisms keeping sleep alive were far more fragile than we ever conceived? To understand this mystery, we need to go back to that pivotal year, 1998. The paper, ominously titled "The Sleep Crisis: A Speculative Path to Extinction," wasn't published in a sensationalist tabloid, but in a respected, peer-reviewed journal. Its authors, a consortium of neurologists, sociologists, and evolutionary biologists, weren't alarmists. They were scientists. Their premise was simple yet terrifying. What if, for reasons unknown, the neurological capacity for sleep began to degrade across the human population? Not a sudden stop, but a gradual, insidious erosion. They meticulously detailed a cascade of events, a domino effect that would begin subtly, almost imperceptibly, before spiraling into an existential nightmare. The initial stages, they argued, would mirror a global pandemic of chronic insomnia. People would find sleep increasingly difficult to achieve, then impossible to maintain, and finally, completely unattainable. It wouldn't be localized. It would be a worldwide phenomenon, spreading like an invisible contagion. The paper wasn't just describing theoretical biological decay. It was painting a picture of societal collapse, illustrating how deeply intertwined our civilization is with this seemingly passive, yet utterly vital biological function. They weren't just asking what if. They were meticulously detailing how, turning a thought experiment into a chillingly plausible future history. But things took a darker turn, far beyond mere tiredness. The first phase, the phase of widespread insomnia, would quickly give way to something far more sinister, a global epidemic of cognitive decline. Imagine billions of minds, starved of proper rest, becoming increasingly fuzzy, indecisive, and irritable. Productivity would plummet. Accidents, from minor mishaps to catastrophic industrial failures, would skyrocket. The paper described a world where doctors would misdiagnose, pilots would miss critical cues, and politicians would make increasingly erratic decisions, all fueled by the relentless grinding fatigue. Simple tasks would become insurmountable hurdles. Speech would slur, memories would falter, and the very concept of clear thought would become a luxury of the past. As days blurred into weeks without true restorative sleep, the lack of distinction between reality and nightmare would become a prevalent symptom. People would begin to hallucinate, seeing things that weren't there, hearing voices, experiencing vivid waking dreams that they couldn't differentiate from their surroundings. Paranoia would take root, fracturing communities and trust. The paper went into disturbing detail about the psychological toll: mass depression, anxiety, and a terrifying escalation of aggression. Domestic disputes would become commonplace, street brawls would erupt over trivialities, and civil unrest would become the norm, all driven by severely compromised minds. The societal structures we take for granted, law, order, healthcare, would buckle under the weight of a population driven to the brink of madness. People, desperate for even a moment of respite, would resort to anything. The black market for sedatives would explode, but even those would eventually prove futile against the body's utter inability to enter proper sleep cycles. The researchers hypothesized that the limbic system, responsible for emotions and memory, would go into overdrive, resulting in uncontrollable emotional outbursts and a complete erosion of empathy. We would become strangers to ourselves and to each other. The physical symptoms would be just as horrific. Immune systems would crash, making us susceptible to every minor pathogen. Organs, deprived of the nightly reboot, would begin to fail. The liver, kidneys, heart, all would slowly succumb to the relentless strain. People wouldn't just be tired, they'd be dying from the inside out, their bodies protesting the unnatural state of constant wakefulness. Imagine the grotesque sight of individuals physically deteriorating while their minds remained horrifyingly awake, trapped in a living hell. What they discovered next, or rather, what they predicted next, changed everything. The final stages, as laid out in the paper, were not merely disturbing. They were a catastrophic vision of humanity's end. After weeks to months of total sleep deprivation, the human brain, utterly ravaged, would enter a state of irreversible psychosis. Rational thought would vanish entirely. The paper described widespread instances of individuals experiencing florid delusions, believing themselves to be figures of myth, gods, or demons. The thin veneer of civilization, already crumbling, would shatter completely. There would be no authority left to enforce laws, no medical personnel left to offer comfort, only a world populated by billions of sentient yet utterly deranged beings. Language itself would degrade, becoming nothing more than guttural cries and screams as the higher cognitive functions completely collapsed. The paper chillingly suggested that, in a world devoid of empathy and driven by primal instinct, cannibalism would become a desperate means of survival for some, a horrifying response to rampant starvation and the breakdown of all social taboos. Driven by thirst and hunger, but also by a profound psychotic confusion, the remaining humans would turn on each other, not as enemies, but as resources in a world where nothing else made sense. The final few would wander aimlessly, their bodies skeletal, their minds a permanent landscape of terror and delusion, until their organs finally gave out, one by one. The researchers concluded that without sleep, humanity's extinction would be swift, brutal, and horrifyingly complete, leaving behind no record, no monument, just silence on a planet that once teemed with vibrant, dreaming life. It wasn't just the physical death that was terrifying. It was the psychological unraveling, the complete loss of self, that truly chilled the bone. To this day, we may never know the truth of whether such a sleep crisis could truly unfold, or if it remains a chilling hypothetical. But the paper serves as a stark, unsettling reminder of the profound importance of something we take for granted every single night. While the extreme scenario of complete sleep vanishing might seem like science fiction, the subtle, insidious erosion of sleep quality and duration in our modern, always-on world is a very real, very present danger. The demands of work, the constant glow of screens, the anxiety of everyday life, all contribute to a society that is chronically sleep-deprived. Are we, in our own small ways, already walking down a miniature version of that terrifying path, slowly eroding our cognitive functions, our empathy, and our overall health without even realizing the true cost? We might not face total extinction tomorrow due to a lack of sleep, but the gradual, cumulative effects of insufficient rest could be chipping away at the very foundations of our well-being and our civilization. It begs the question, how much more can we push ourselves before our bodies and minds finally, inevitably, demand their sacred period of unconsciousness, or collapse entirely? The researchers left us with a chilling open question. How much does humanity rely on the unconscious, unspoken promise of rest to maintain its fragile hold on sanity and society? If you want more mysteries like this, the next video explores the strange case of the village that mysteriously forgot how to dream.